Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar about Edge Delivery Services, enabling next-generation content and commerce experiences. Today, we'll talk about the future of content and commerce with Edge Delivery Services, Adobe Experience Manager, and Adobe Commerce. Throughout the webinar, there will be demos of functionality to give you a more real-life perspective on the tools that we will talk about today. With that, let's begin. So first, let me introduce our speakers today. My name is Alex. I'm a solution consultant at Vaimo, and today I'm joined by our good friends at Adobe, John, a solution architect.
Morning.
And Joe, solution consultant.
Hello.
I want to mention that throughout the webinar, please make sure to use the questions tab in the bottom left corner. You can put your relevant questions there, and all of the questions will be answered at the end of the webinar, as well as you will have a chance to ask more questions during the Q&A session in the end. Also, be sure to engage with polls that we will post during the webinar. Quick word about Vaimo. Vaimo is lifelong partner of Adobe, working with Adobe Commerce, Adobe Manager, Adobe Target, Adobe Campaign, and Adobe Analytics, and more. At Vaimo, we believe that experience is everything, bringing together digital commerce, content management, insights and activation, and data management. You can learn more about Vaimo by visiting vaimo.com. Today, we'll talk about 4 things. First, we'll talk about doing composable commerce with Adobe and how that looks like. Second, we'll talk about Edge Delivery Services for commerce and how they enable composable approach. Third, we'll talk about how Edge Delivery Services work. And fourth, we'll talk about GenAI A/B testing analytics built into Edge Delivery Services. Let's start with how Adobe Commerce is enabling composable commerce. So Magento and Adobe Commerce history is one of continuous innovation. It started in 2008 with Magento's first release, the greatest open source e-commerce platform on the market at the time. Fast forward to 2016, Magento brings cloud options with AWS and Microsoft Azure to customers worldwide. In 2018, projects like PWA Studio, Headless Storefront, and community-driven MSI, multi-source inventory, laid the foundation of decoupling e-commerce monoliths into composable services. In 2020, thanks to the full API coverage of B2C and B2B functionalities, true composable commerce became possible. Now, in 2024, with services like App Builder, API Mesh, Edge Delivery Services, Live Search, Pro Recommendations, and others, Adobe Commerce is enabling merchants to do next-generation commerce across every channel. So here we have a small poll for you. Please let us know which version of Adobe Commerce or Magento was the first one that you used. I will also participate, submit my vote, but for me it was 1914, 19 open source and 14 enterprise edition at the time. But Joe, what was the first one for you?
Oh, I'm a late bloomer. I only really started using it when it was acquired by Adobe. So I think it was 2.2, might have been 2.3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking it. I think the first time that I worked with it was around the launch of 2.0. So I kind of remember working with Vaimo at that point on a launch. I think was the first cloud. It was the release of 2, and I think it was with order management as well, the product that we had at the time. So it was quite a lot of change in one go. It was a big project. But I was looking at the chat and looking at some of the names in there, and I think there's going to be a few people It's 5% on earlier already. So I recognize some names in there that I think have been around our ecosystem for a long time. So I think we've got quite a history, really, of people working with the product for a long time.
We do. But actually, what's interesting, the data that I can see right now shows that most people attending the most popular option in the pool is that people don't really have a lot of experience with Adobe Commerce and Magento, so they're coming from different Adobe products or maybe even outside of the Adobe ecosystem.
Yeah, how many people 1.4 as well? 25% of people 1.4.
Yeah, it's almost equal. Cool. So please keep voting. It's very interesting to see those results, but let's continue. So now let's talk about how Adobe Commerce is enabling composable commerce and making it available for broader market. This is being done by removing the hustle and technical challenge of composable commerce without really compromising the benefits. And we define 4 pillars of this strategy and approach. First, App Builder. So App Builder is a cloud platform you can use to move your customizations away from the core PHP application, being Adobe Commerce or Magento. And you can enable integrations with third-party systems in a new way. Vaimo is frontiering this approach with integration for Akineo PIM, which we'll be working together on with Adobe already this December. Next, we have commerce SaaS services like live search and pro recommendations and others. Those are designed to remove the performance bottlenecks, if we talk about catalog service, for example, and improve out-of-the-box functionality when we talk about live search and pro recommendations. So they improve your Adobe Commerce site with those services. Third, we have Edge Delivery Service. Edge Delivery Services is the next gen front-end technology that brings together excellent performance, commerce functionality, and content authoring with Adobe Experience Manager and Google Docs and Microsoft Word. And lastly, Experience Platform Connector. This is designed to bring the Adobe Commerce into the Adobe Experience Platform ecosystem for unified data sharing and insights across all of the Adobe products. You can learn more about these tools at Adobe Experience League or Partner Portal, or by reaching out directly to Vaimo or Adobe. Today, though, our focus is Edge Delivery Services. So let's talk more about that. What is Edge Delivery Services? So let's take a step back. Our goal is always to deliver the highly personalized commerce experience across any channel of engagement in a way that gives each area of business control over its activities to be able to perform them whenever and however they want. And Edge Delivery Services is a technical solution to do exactly that. You can create content via Adobe Experience Manager authoring process using traditional CMS capabilities, but you can also create content via Google Docs and Microsoft suite of Office tools like Word and Excel. On top of that, you flip these content pages into being commerce experiences by enabling Adobe Commerce drop-in components. Think of these like small applications that deliver focused commerce capabilities such as product details page, checkout, search, etc. I want to tell you a little story. I was working with our marketing department on a page about Edge Delivery Services. And of course, as many companies, we used Google Doc to collaborate and to do the review process and all kinds of iterations on this page. And while working on this page, I was asked by our marketer to provide some real-world use case of Edge Delivery Services. And my answer was that this process that we are going through right now is the perfect example of the real-world use case. Just imagine that I do my edits to the Google Doc, and you as a marketer, you review them and you just hit publish in your browser and the page goes live, right? So instead, you would spend like after we finish the review, you would spend like next couple of hours or days or even more than that to bring the page up to the CMS system of the site, to make sure the HTML is all right, that the markup is correct, which is obviously totally different from the Google Doc. So you need kind of to recreate that. And that's whole new kind of, that's the whole bunch of work that if you have the capability to publish from the Google Doc would be eliminated, would not be needed. And that's the power of edge delivery services alongside the great performance and commerce capabilities. So, but in addition to the authoring process that I just gave the use case example of, we do have the GenAI and A/B testing capabilities built into edge delivery services when used together with Adobe Experience Manager. So with that, you can create versions of the content that you use on the page, like images, and copy as well. So you can create different variations of the text and headlines. So and you can test those versions against your real audience and analyze the results. And all of that is built into edge delivery services. Joe will tell more about that later on. But that's just one area of edge delivery services capabilities. And then lastly, I want to talk about commerce. Obviously, we at Vaimo are all about commerce. And when it comes to commerce, you bring, you build on top of edge delivery services boilerplate and integrate pre-built or custom drop-in components or Adobe Commerce SaaS services like Live Search and Pro Recommendations. On top of that, you can also use Luma Bridge to enable progressive migration from your existing storefront like Luma or PWA Studio to the new Edge Delivery Services front-end. We have Edge Delivery Services clients who use their Luma front-end functionality for cart and checkout, but use new pages on Edge Delivery Services for CMS and PLPs and PDPs, which gives them the highest performance and highest like flexibility in terms of creating the new content on those pages. But they still rely on highly customized pages like cart and checkout that they already built on Luma or PWA. So that's really great solution for bringing the new front end to the market fast. With that, I want to pass over to John to tell you more about the technical side of things and how edge delivery services actually work. John, floor is yours.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, so I'm going to kind of step a little bit more into the detail of how that fits together, because it's kind of, I guess it's a little bit abstract at the moment. You can use a Word document or you can use a Google Doc. And it's important really what that developer experience looks like, because one of the key benefits of edge delivery services is that it kind of improves the flexibility, the way that you can author in different tools, and also helps to kind of improve the speed of content creation. So we actually, when we initially launched edge delivery services back at Summit last year, we had a booth on the stand where we were asking customers and partners to actually set up a site on edge delivery services live on the stand. We were trying to sort of demonstrate just how quick and easy it is to spin up a site. And I think that the fastest was about 20 minutes. So, that was obviously a controlled environment, and we, we're helping people along. But the process is kind of like this. First thing is, it's a bit of a change in the way that we work at Adobe, in that we're making edge delivery services very open. So developers or customers or anyone who's interested can actually go to the website and check out the code and have a play with it and start to use it. You can actually spin up a site on edge delivery services without interacting with anyone at Adobe or Vaimo or anyone else, which is quite different. So your first step for spinning up a commerce site would be you clone a boilerplate code repository, which has the drop-in components that would make up your commerce site. You then link them to your backend instance. So assuming that you've got an Adobe Commerce on cloud instance already, you sort of connect it up. And then at that point, you've actually got a site. So like straight away, you've got a working, functioning site with all the basic capabilities of a commerce site. And your next steps would be really then to brand them. So it might be changing the CSS and the HTML to get the right look and feel. You can go a step further where you sort of enrich it a little bit more. We've got different content blocks that you can use. You can pick and choose from the drop-in. So it could be that you're using a separate drop-in for your particular site, and you can customize them as well. So you can, change the CSS and the look and feel of them. You can also add in extra capability into what we call slots. So you're actually building on top of the core capabilities. And I'll talk a bit more in a later slide about how that kind of works and what the technical background to that is. But essentially, you can very quickly get hold of that boilerplate, start to customize it, and have a site spun up. When that site's spun up, you will get a performance score of 100 with Lighthouse. So it will be the base template is a very, very performant set of JavaScript that will get you a really well-performing site from the get-go. The other bit that is important is obviously, like Alex talked about, there's different ways of editing that content. So we've got this method of using what we call document-based authoring, where you're using a Word document or a Google document, and you edit the content within the Word document, but it's then passed into Markdown, and the Markdown is then rendered to the web. So you've got controls around what can be put in the Word document, but it does mean that Google document becomes the tool that you use for the editing. So the other step that you have within the project is really setting up the links between those documents and where they appear on the website, which section of the site is going to be edited. And it could be that you're using a Google Doc for a certain page. There might be a Microsoft Word document for another area of the site. You could be using the AEM native kind of WYSIWYG editor for other areas of the site, just depending on what the workflow requirements are for the different site. One of the examples that myself and Alex were discussing is, if you think of a typical merchant, perhaps you've got physical retail stores, perhaps you've got an online presence. Your online presence is going to be maybe managed by a centralized team, but you could have individual stores that need to update and edit some content for their individual store. You might not necessarily want to train them and roll out Experience Manager to all of those stores. Maybe they're already using a Word document or they're already using Google Docs. They could use that as their way of creating the content. So as this setup progresses, you're basically setting up links to which documents are driving which bit of the site. And you have a tool called Sidekick as well, which is a kind of a browser extension that will install. And where you go into your Word document on the web, your Sidekick extension pops up and you can make some changes and publish. So we'll jump into a demo in a second and show you how that works. But just to think about it as a kind of architecture, Alex talked about API Mesh and App Builder. We talked about some of the SaaS services. So this is kind of the architecture that we're sort of moving towards, where you have the core commerce application, which is really the root of the functionality. It understands the order, it understands about delivery methods and payment methods, but you're building on top of that with the SaaS services. So live search, product recommendations, and the catalog service, they're giving you the performance in a way that is much easier to work with and much easier to scale. On top of that, you've got API Mesh and App Builder, which are really, that's kind of the layer that goes between those core services that Adobe is providing and managing, and what you build on top of it to actually customize it. So your storefront, your Edge Delivery Services store, which the customer is interacting with, becomes a lot easier to maintain because you're doing the customization within that layer rather than going into the core of what was Magento and what is now Adobe Commerce and making changes there. So this architecture is really a lot easier to live with. It brings you a lower TCO and hopefully improves the time to value and allows you to actually make changes in a way that are much easier to work with. And obviously we give you the performance then as well, because that edge delivery services layer is making great use of content delivery networks. We're rendering the content in a way that really keeps the performance there. And we'll talk a bit later on as well about some of the ways that we help you to maintain the performance even as you make changes and customize it. So 2 key ways of being able to edit the content. We've got document-based authoring, which is the Google Doc or the Microsoft Word document. It's a known tool. It's probably a tool that your teams are using already. Maybe they're using a Word doc as a way of sharing a draft of some copy before it's published. But by doing it this way, you can actually just take that content and publish it directly, or have that tool as a more fundamental part of the authoring flow. The other way is also to still use the AAM authoring flow as well. So if you've got a team where they really need the WYSIWYG capabilities, there's other tools within that authoring flow as well. So you can see products, you can see different content blocks and more easily pull them into the edited experience. So there's different ways of using the tools. You can use the 2 together on different parts of the site, or depending on the team's preference. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. And obviously you're probably already using Google Docs or Microsoft Office within the business anyway. So in terms of rolling out and training staff on using it, that's kind of much easier than potentially using Experience Manager. It also just might be easier to administrate. We go back to that example of a store environment. Typically you've got a higher turnover of individuals within a store environment. And so anytime that you have to train them on a specific tool, it can be a little bit more difficult. If you keep to using a Word document or a tool that they're probably already familiar with, that makes that whole kind of that whole kind of process of keeping people up to speed with the tools a lot simpler as well. So some really sort of nice use cases that really make sense with this. So next, we're going to look at a quick demo of what that actually looks like in practice. And the demo kind of runs quite quickly, so I'll kind of talk through it as we're going. But essentially, this is a standard Word document that is being edited. And you can see we've got the Sidekick browser extension is installed up in the top left. So we've got a preview button. We've got a My Assets button that links to Adobe Assets. If you've got images within Adobe Assets, you can pull them in and drop them into the page. We can also use this tool to actually publish the content. So you might have got a preview. You can also then hit publish, and this will trigger the flow, which will pull in that updated content. There is a service that Adobe maintains, which will take that content, render it down to Markdown, and then from the Markdown, it will use the code that's in the blocks or in the drop-ins to actually render that into the finished HTML that the customer will see on the CDN. So basically, as the customer's browsing the CDN, they're seeing fully rendered HTML that's super performant. And there's this whole kind of process flow that takes it from that Word document and pushes it up onto the front end. So super simple to work with, using standard tools, very fast publishing time. The content can be live within minutes. And obviously the key thing as well is that you keep that performance. So you keep the 100 performance that we want to make use of. And then obviously that is the document-based editing. You've still got the option to use this universal editor as well. So the universal editor is a bit more like the traditional Experience Manager experience that customers are used to with Experience Manager. That's much more WYSIWYG kind of look and feel to it. There's a couple of extra options there as well. So for things like dropping in product information, you've got popovers that allow you to quickly see the products that you've got within the Commerce catalog and drop those into the pages. So again, like different authoring flows, different ways of doing things that are going to be more suited to different teams, and you can make use of whichever one makes the most sense. So I'm going to hand over to Joe, and Joe's going to tell us a little bit more about the features that using these different authoring experiences open up.
Hi, thanks, John. So let's talk about where we've got to so far, because the goal, what we're trying to achieve is to deliver these really highly personalized commerce experiences across any channel. But more importantly, we want to have each area of the business. Those business owners should be able to have control over their activities and be able to perform them wherever or in whichever tools that they prefer. So one of those things then that we find that we need, once you start to bring into your commerce sites this more kind of content focus as well. So those lifestyle pages are things that are going to help increase user engagement and we hope eventually increase conversion. You very quickly get to this situation where I want to be able to test this content. I want to be able to create multiple variations. I even want to target those variations towards different audience groups. So we call this Generate Variations, is a solution name. And it's how we enable commerce customers to create simple ABN tests at scale using edge delivery services. So essentially what it means is a business owner can, as a content creator, can take control over a content page, a control page, and then they can have the assistance of AI services to help them by creating new text or new images, potentially using something like Adobe Firefly, or as John was talking about, using the assets you already have within your digital asset management system. But it means that we can create variations of that control page. So now we can have at least our A and our B experiences. That means then that because we're using AI to help with this, we're able to scale this up really quickly. So you can generate potentially hundreds of page variations very quickly, and also measure that engagement, whether it's click-throughs, conversions, in real user monitoring, so you can determine a winning experience and therefore actually deliver to your customers what they expect and also deliver for your businesses. By the way, just so you know, this is using no personally identifiable information. So it's a non-PII multivariate test. So you can't use PII in the test. It's more designed to let you do extremely fast content creation and release. You can uplift it with something like Adobe Target, for example, if you want to make it an even more personalized test instead. But looking at, let's have a little look at what this looks like in real life. So imagine in the same website that John was talking about, I'm one of those marketing managers, and I obviously want to increase the engagement on my site. But when we've tried to do testing in the past, it has taken us weeks, maybe months, to be able to go through all the approvals, talk to all the people that it's necessary to do. What we can do here instead is that I'm able to now use the power of edge delivery services by going into that generate variations. We give you a whole heap of prompt templates to get you started in the best possible way. You can obviously create your own prompts as well. In this case, what I'm looking at doing is creating a new hero banner. So I go into the hero banner prompt, and it's going to walk me through the process. So it's as easy as possible for me to put in the content. It gives me some starter content so I know what to do. But the main thing I really need to talk about is how I'm expecting the user to interact with this page and what that intent is going to be. In this case, I want them to be able to look through a list of adventures and then help them before they talk to an actual travel advisor. But once I go through this, then I can say, what audience is this going to be targeted towards? I have Adobe Target here, and I'm going to choose the weekend travelers audience. If I didn't have Adobe Target, I could bring in a CSV file from a third party instead. And at that point, I can start to generate my variations. Now, you should understand, when we first started doing this with Adobe, we did this in like a sit-down meeting with copywriters. And what they were finding was GenAI tools were not providing them publication-ready copy. So we worked with them and we iterated, and now we're sure that we can get you like 90 to 95% of the way. This code that has been generated here is brand safe and is actually something that you can publish on your sites with the minimum of intervention afterwards. But once that code has been generated, as has been validated by our copywriters, we can see here I have a number of variations. I like this second variation, I think. The adventure awaits you. But now I want to generate an image that would go with this text copy. So this is going to open up for me Adobe Express embedded, and it lets me choose a few options. I want it to be a hero banner, so square doesn't work, so I'll change it to landscape. And you can also see that the prompt has automatically been put into me based on what the text was generated earlier. But once the images are here, which are very pretty, I like that second one. I could continue editing this, in whatever way I wanted, but in this case, I'm just going to save it, and then it will be there against my text prompt, and my text, I can now see my image as well. Now, having one variant isn't particularly useful. So now I want to create a variant for another audience as well. So in this case, I'm going to go for people who've previously purchased surfing packages. In the same way, I keep everything else the same because it's still the same message. We generate that variant. Whilst it's doing that, let's talk about this UI. So we're trying to get this balance between simplicity and power. But if I needed to add another field, for example, if I wanted to be able to do a prompt to make sure that I got the most effective search engine optimization, it's really easy for me to add that new field in. And as soon as I do the closing bracket, you can see that the field turns up in real time. And now I can actually start using GenAI as well to help optimize towards search engine. But, in that spirit, here's one I did earlier. We now see my surfing message, and you can see that this is a more specialized message compared to the general variant before, much more towards, the adventure about being in the ocean and all the rest of it. But in this way, I've managed to generate my 2 variants. I could save them for later as a favorite, or I can just insert them directly into that document that we're using to generate our website in Edge Delivery Services. So going back into that document, I can now see my variations are now the same way as John did before. I can preview. And when I go into preview, here we have the default experience, but now I can see I have my control, and then I can go into my surfer experience. We see what it's going to look like, or I could go into the weekend travelers experience, which is what most people are going to get. That quick, that simple for a non-technical, non-commerce user to be able to generate tests within their own website in order to increase customer engagement and make it more likely that they are going to convert within your business. Moving on to, and part of so what we're trying to do here is to maximize throughput without sacrificing quality. So I was making that throwaway comment that when we did this in the past, it was taking weeks, potentially months, in order to get a simple test out onto a website. I wasn't joking. I mean, when you look at how many things need to be done often, particularly at the very beginning of the process, it's not hard to see where those weeks just slip away, particularly when you have multiple departments that have to work together. But, half the problem is that a lot of things have been done in the past with written briefs, maybe with some brief mock-ups, but most of the people you're working with can't necessarily visualize what that's going to look like. So you end up with lots and lots of rounds of iteration when people genuinely understand, oh, this is what you meant. And then you have to kind of go back to the drawing board again. You can easily lose a month of time just doing that. Part of what we get with GenAI is we get from that kind of mock-up to what it's actually going to look up much, much faster. And it's much faster to generate multiple kind of visual treatments really quickly for people to choose between, rather than them trying to write a written brief that the creatives then have to try and understand in some way and come back with something reasonable. So it's not lying to say we can absolutely get people from this kind of, 6, 8, 12-week time just to get a test out with maybe only 3, 4, or 5 variations, to being in less than a month, being able to put out 50 or 100 variations with all the analytics that goes behind it as well. Because what we're trying to do is to make testing simple. Essentially, whether it's doing the most basic, which I'll show you a demo of in just a second, which is called instant experimentation, where you can just say, I want to do a really simple A/B test. I just want to have a 50-50 split between the audiences. Show me how that works. We make that incredibly simple for you to do within this environment, all the way through to doing full experimentation, which might be going across multiple pages where you're targeting things very specifically at different segments. All of this is supported within Edge Delivery Services, within that document-based authoring as well, so that you don't have to move out of a tool or deploy an additional tool within your organization in order to make this work. And it also comes with an automated analytics chatbot as well. So as well as just the kind of general view, so you can see the percentages and you can kind of see the conversions, you can also always go into the chatbot, and using natural language, it will try and give you the deeper insights into what's happening, so you can understand why things are winning and ultimately use that to develop additional bits of content for your site as time goes on. So looking at what this would look like, essentially in this case, you can see that I'm starting in SharePoint and I'm just browsing to a document, the same way that John did before, a document that's going to run some pages on my website. But in this one, same one as before, when we scroll down through this, we can see when I preview through it, I'm going to see the same website we were talking about before. But now when I scroll into the document itself and I look at the document metadata, the experimentation that's running in this document is simply there in the text. So I can look and I can see what my experiment name is. And remember this for later, you're going to see experiment number 2. I can see that it is an instant experiment. So that's one of those ones where I've just got an A and a B option, and it's going to do a 50-50 split between them, and all sorts of other metadata that's going to be used for either analytics or for conversion tracking or anything else that I'm going to need in order to see if this is successful. When I then take this and if I had a different type of test, I can basically go into it, and essentially it will show you how I can do a simulation before I even publish it, frankly. So it can, from this, I can actually look at what the different options are going to be, and I can make sure that what I'm about to publish to my website is actually going to be effective and is going to work for me. This is really important, again, because so many people, they don't see it when it's kind of by itself. They only see it when they're in this kind of preview mode and they can see what things are going to look like in real life. In this case, the experiment that I'm running, when I'm on the website instead, I can very easily go into that experiment too, and it will show me what's running at the moment. I can see my control experience, I can see my challenger experience, and then as data is coming in, what if I've published this and the data is coming in, this is also how I can interrogate how it is performing. But once I'm happy with it, once everybody's approved it, because we're still going to have approvals, we don't get rid of that the whole human element. It's just easier for them to approve in this way. Once that's done, it's really simple for me just to go to the top and say, I want to publish this. And then that becomes the experiment that's going to be published to my live site. And hopefully we'll start running ASAP to encourage more conversion and more adherence to our business goals. And at that point, I think I'm handing back over. Before I hand back over to John, I would very much like to know how often you guys are using A/B testing on your projects at the moment, and we will come back to that later. And now I'm going to hand back to John to go more into the performance-based architecture.
Yeah, so I mean, Joe's explained how we speed up the creation of the content, but obviously the performance of that content in terms of how quickly it is to browse is another really key thing with edge delivery services. And there's kind of a few different levels to what we've done to make sure that we keep the lighthouse scores. The first thing is that those drop-in components that we create, we kind of stripped out all of the JavaScript frameworks, and we've gone back to very kind of basic vanilla JavaScript, and that obviously has a big impact on the way that the code performs in the browser. So you get a much better experience straight away. The other thing is that from a developer experience, it's kind of the learning curve is a lot lower because you're not having to learn the framework and keep up with the framework. It's really just using kind of the way that the content is is cached, and the CDN is and the pure JavaScript is helping you get the performance. So that's the first thing. The drop-ins are also, they're curated by Adobe. So we created those base drop-ins. We know that they perform with a Lighthouse score of 100. So as long as you start with those, you can only make it worse. But if you make it worse, then we do testing each time there is a new version of the content. So you can see straight away that a change that you've made might have brought it down from that 100 Lighthouse score. So we kind of start from perfect, and if we do things that make a change, then we know we've got something to fix. Whereas kind of the old way of working was more about you create a site and then you kind of go in and try to optimize it and try to eke out a bit more performance. So we're kind of working a bit backwards in a way that hopefully makes a lot more sense. The other thing that we do is the way that JavaScript renders the page, it concentrates on the bit that the browser sees first and then renders other things afterwards. So basically it's kind of phased content rendering. We make sure that the largest contentful paint, the bit that you see first, is rendered straight away. So that again gives to this feeling of really performant content. This obviously impacts the search engine rankings as well. At the moment, we're seeing that where you have very good Lighthouse scores, you're getting very highly ranked by Google, and you're seeing a real uplift in traffic from that as well. And that obviously has a direct impact on the conversion rate. So that's a really big step forward. And then obviously the CDNs themselves as well. We're delivering content to the user from a delivery point that is, geographically closer to them and is obviously very optimized. So that's kind of a whole bunch of different things that help to work together to really give you the really good performance. So summary, high availability. We're using the content delivery networks in a way that makes a lot of sense to get the content close to the user. We're doing phased content rendering. So we're using the JavaScript to actually render the page in a way that makes more sense and is, gives you a better experience. We are doing automated testing. So every time a new version of the content is deployed, there is something that is testing the page, looking at actually what's the experience for the end users and how fast is it performing. So you can, straight away see when you've made a change that has a negative impact on the performance and go back and fix it. And then obviously proactively monitoring that architecture. I think I was on a call the other day where we've actually, the last 12 months, there's been basically zero downtime for that edge delivery services infrastructure. So it's incredibly high availability, making sure that, we're sort of monitoring that and that all the delivery networks are performing as they should do. So that brings me to the last demo, which is it's a very fast demo, this, so I might have to play it twice to explain what's going on. But this is a demo that I really like because it kind of, we're talking a lot about what we're doing with commerce and how it's linking in with the rest of the DX platform to really make that whole process of generating content much more fluid, improving the velocity of it so that ultimately merchants are able to create more variants of the content that is more relevant and more personalized to an individual user. This demo is a really good kind of demonstration of that because it shows Adobe Commerce being integrated with Adobe Assets. So the product images are being pulled from Adobe Assets. And then we're also using the Adobe Express popover, which is also using the Firefly generative AI capabilities to update product images in commerce. So what you get from that end-to-end workflow, is I'll just replay it, is that the user is coming in, they're choosing one of the products that's one of the Luma products. They open that in the Express popover, and then they're using the Firefly generative AI capabilities to update that image. And in this case, they're asking for a water bottle to be added into the pocket of the rucksack. Generative AI creates the image. You've got a couple of variations you can choose. The image gets saved back out directly into Adobe Assets. And then going back into the commerce backend, you can then update that image and use it in your commerce site straight away. So there's a lot of bits in that process. There's a lot of tools being used, but it's a very short process, and a back office user is able to make that image update within minutes. They're not having to download an image asset and open it in Photoshop or have a designer open it in Photoshop and make the change, save the file back out, push it over to another team who downloads it again and uploads it into the back end of commerce. You're doing it all from that one process. So I quite like that demo because it kind of pulls together a lot of different parts of what we do at Adobe. But I think that's a very unique thing. Like, this is very unique to Adobe and very unique to the products and the capabilities that we've got.
I think it's close to my heart as well, John, because I like the idea that you save those creative people from doing those kind of monkey tasks to actually doing really creative stuff where, their skills are needed, instead of, half the time, change the color, add a water bottle, doing something mindless, which if you can get the AI to do it instead, that has to be better, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same as with really, like, from a technical point of view, it's the same as the technical process. If we can make the simple things easier, then we free up the clever people to do the cool stuff that really brings us value. And whether that is freeing up the guys' time at Vaimo to do more cool things for you as a merchant, or whether it's freeing up your time as a merchant to be able to create more content that's more relevant to your customers, that's where you really get the value. So yeah, I really like that demo. And it looks like we've got lots of questions that have been popping up in the chat.
I think the first one was to you, John, because when you were talking earlier about the architecture, Pavan was asking, how long does it take for you to deploy and integrate Commerce boilerplate?
Yeah, I mean,
and not in a controlled environment.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's it. I kind of cheated. I said 20 minutes in that first bit because that was done in a controlled environment where everything was ready to go. I think one of the projects that I saw recently, it was kind of 3 or 4 months that they took to sort of deploy their storefront using edge delivery services. And the things that changed the project are obviously how much customization of those boilerplate drop-ins that you do. So you're going to be changing the styling. If you've got, for example, I would imagine a fairly common thing would be if you've got user-generated reviews, maybe you're using a third-party service to kind of capture the reviews. That's probably an integration that would take a little bit more time. There will be other things as well. So if you're doing, maybe you're a B2B merchant, you've maybe got more complicated checkout flows, those kind of things, again, those need more complicated customization. Those are the things that will probably take a lot of time. So yeah, it's a non-answer really, because it depends on your capabilities, depends on how much customization you want to do. It can be very, very quick. I think the fact that we've stripped out a lot of the frameworks and we're using kind of pure JavaScript and HTML and CSS, that makes it a lot easier. So making those customizations is easier. The fact that we rely on the GraphQL APIs and we've got this kind of separation between the commerce instance and the front end stack, that from a development perspective makes life a lot simpler. Because if you upgrade your backend site, as long as the APIs work between your front end and your back end, then everything should still work. So testing should be a bit easier. It's certainly a little bit cleaner because you can test the API and say, we put A into the API and we still get B out, so we know it's still working. So there's a lot of kind of things in the technical nature of it that make it a lot easier to work with. And I think the customization's a little bit simpler as well. It's certainly not, there's people in the chat who, I think Regis said he's been working with Magento since 1.0. So I'm sure he spent lots of time working with knockout.js and XML. And like in those days, changing the look and feel could be quite complicated. Now it's back to CSS and HTML, and it should be a lot easier. So yeah, I think we've definitely made a big step forward there.
So on a similar vein, this one might be more to Alexi though. So what kind of tech stack and skills are needed to manage and customize edge delivery services? You're on mute, Alexi.
You can't get away with not answering the question by being on mute. It's cheating.
I'm back in line. So there are a couple of aspects to that. So first, if we talk about like edge delivery services on its own, obviously, like John mentioned, pretty standard front-end stack with JavaScript at the core. But we also need to keep in mind that we can rely on the Luma bridge to leverage your existing front end for things that you are not quite ready to rebuild. So you can do that. And I think this is like oftentimes the feature that sometimes is overseen. So it's really we should really keep that in mind, that for those complex B2B scenarios, for those scenarios when we have some pages really, really customized, even like John, you mentioned, like PDP with user reviews and maybe like AR stuff, right, for product assets, we can still fall back, sort of say, to Luma or BWA, or we have that capability to fall back to any storefront, really. And I think this is a huge advantage in terms of going to market. Yeah, in terms of like skill set, I would say pretty standard, modern front-end technologies like JavaScript and obviously CSS, HTML.
So following up on that, we got a question about, I'm using PWA. What's the benefit of changing to EDS and how risky is that change? So I'm guessing, Alexi, what you just talked about, that you can always fall back to a different framework, is one of the ways of de-risking it. But how would you guys, how do you see the benefits of changing from PWA to EDS, and what risks or caveats do you see to that? Who wants to go first? You're on mute again, Alexi. I don't know what you're doing.
So in terms of advantages, obviously, I'll be kind of honest here. Performance is a big one. because not every storefront, even those who claim they are performance first, they cannot claim 100 score on page speed the moment you go live. So that's a huge advantage out there, right? Then the content authoring. I would say like the Google Doc integration and IAM integration, which comes sort of out of the box, is a huge advantage as well. But also in terms of development, developer story, right? When you are managing the front end team, right? There is one thing to have a requirement that, hey, you should be able to kind of create stuff in JavaScript, and a whole another story when you have requirement, hey, you need to be very familiar with PWA Studio, which is much more rare skill set. And yeah, I would say that those I mentioned are one of the biggest advantages that we see at Vaimo. But John, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a key thing, is that stack of JavaScript without any frameworks, PWA Studio, where you'd already got a couple of different frameworks being used. This also it standardizes across Experience Manager and Commerce as well, which I think is quite interesting, because it means, we as Adobe I'm a commerce guy, but content and commerce is really, it works together so closely that having that same technology stack just makes it kind of easier to work with. I think that's a really big step forward, because it just makes that whole managing of the site and of the two things working together just a lot more seamless. Yeah, and then obviously I think the performance is a huge thing. I think we've really stepped forward with the performance, and being able to start from 100 Lighthouse score, you get a huge benefit with the search engine optimization. We're seeing, that might change as Google changes its algorithm, but certainly having a really well-performing site is something that Google has, for a long time, boosted pages that do that. So I think it's going to basically stay around, maybe not to the same extent, but definitely continue to give benefits. So yeah, I think that's the key things really.
On that perennial fraught question about performance, then what impact, if any, does edge delivery services have on things like the checkout process and conversions to things that we all have a lot of close attention to and are not always as good as we would want them to be? What impact does EDS have on that?
It's interesting, because what we've seen with the merchants that have gone live so far is that some of them have just actually done the top funnel pages. So a landing page, a product listing page, and a product detail page. Those are the pages that Google ranks the most. Those are the things that have the biggest impact. So if you've got a lot of investment in your checkout process, whether it's PWA Studio or Luma, then Alexi mentioned the Luma bridge. Like, that's a way of basically using a Luma-based or a PWA Studio-based checkout flow and still using it with an edge delivery service front end. So you get the benefit of the extra performance and search engine optimization, but you don't have to get into the complicated stuff of migrating the back end. And that can work really well. You get the benefit, but you're not having to sort of spend the development hours to move the code across. So that's definitely an option. That's definitely one way of doing it.
Cool. And obviously, as time goes on, we're expecting to provide more drop-in components. So more of the back-end functionality in commerce is expected to naturally be pushed into edge delivery services more natively as well.
Yeah, and I think even today there's been some updates to the documentation, and there's a couple more of the drop-ins that have gone live. So the capabilities are kind of getting built over time. We've added some extra documentation as well, so you can see what's supported, what are the things that you'd have to customize. So I think it'll come down to the individual merchant as to like where the sweet spot is for them to spend the time moving fully to edge delivery, or whether just to like migrate certain pages and get the benefit of the performance.
And we have a question, which I'm probably going to take actually, which is, can we use edge delivery services to support omni-channel marketing? So my day job is not really doing commerce. I do commerce in addition to other things, but I spend more of my time in either content or marketing automation or personalization and CDP. And can we use edge delivery services to support omni-channel marketing? Oh, hell yes. I think this is the key point. When I talk to a lot of my commerce customers, the content that they're using often is trapped within their back-end systems, and it's being used then by the catalog service or whatever. So you're creating catalog pages. But whether it's the only channel we were thinking today in the demo was around the web channel, which is part of marketing automation as well. But the key point about edge delivery services is it is allowing you to have use for a digital asset management system and the controls that go around that. And the digital asset management system can drive any channel where you have content that you are pushing towards a user. So whether that's your email system or push or in-app messaging, whether it's talking about how you're going to get images and copy onto Facebook and all the other kind of social media channels, that DAM ends up being that central component that then can actually drive those additional types of channels. There's loads of demos online and that we did at Summit as well that shows you using that Express plugin that we showed in some of the demos today, where you can use those same kind of templates, not just to generate text and an image, but to actually generate social media posts, entire email templates. So this is only the tip of a very large iceberg of once you start getting into this idea that commerce and content really do belong together. And once you start to free up that business part of the organization to try and, attract with honey people into your site so that they can actually buy things, then they can actually use that same kind of framework to drive across any channel that they're talking to customers. Anything from you two that you want to add, or did I proselytize enough?
That was very definitive, very definitive.
So we have time, I think, for one more question. I'm not sure we're going to be able to answer this one here, but we'll try. We have another one from Pavan. So can we provide some pointers about the licensing of edge delivery services?
Yeah, I mean, I can probably try and answer that one. Essentially, what we're trying to do is have some capability for commerce customers to start using edge delivery service. So the document-based authoring, depending on your license tier, you're able to make use of some content requests. If you want to make use of the full kind of universal editor, so the whole kind of AEM kind of editor, that does require an AEM license. So that's kind of where the crossover is. I would say as well that, the demos that we showed you today, we used some of the Firefly stuff. There's the Express drop-up. So there's a kind of a bunch of stuff that we were using. So yeah, as ever, kind of reach out to Vaimo, reach out to us, and we can sort of help you understand, which are the things that are going to be relevant for you and how that sort of licensing works. And, experience managers licensing is kind of complicated depending on whether it's assets or sites. So it's probably not one that we can answer straight away, but reach out to us and we can work through that with you and work out which are the things that are going to bring you value.
Okay, thank you guys. So I think we're at the top of the hour. So I want to thank everybody who's stayed to the end. I hope you found it useful and informative. I learned loads preparing for this from these two people. If you have any further questions, you can reach out to any of us. There are email addresses and contact details there. So Vaimo or Adobe, and we'll do our best to help you. But otherwise, thank you very much for your attendance today. Thank you very much to John and to Alexi and to Vaimo for setting this up. And I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, all.